Kia ora koutou katoa. G'day everyone. Thank you very much for coming along today. Apologies for the delay. The Tararua district have also declared. We wanted to make sure we had as up-to-date information for you as possible before we came today. As you are aware, Cyclone Gabrielle has had major impacts across most of the North Island. This is a significant disaster for the lives of New Zealanders. Today we are expecting to see more rain and high winds. We are through the worst of the storm itself, but we know that we are all facing extensive flooding, slips, damaged roads and infrastructure. Accordingly, on the advice of NEMA, I have this morning at 8:43 a.m. declared a national state of emergency. It will apply to the 6 regions that have already declared a local state of emergency, that is Northland, Auckland, Tairāwhiti, Bay of Plenty, Waikato and Hawke's Bay. This is the 3rd time in New Zealand's history that we have felt it necessary to do this. This is absolutely not a reflection on the outstanding work being done by the emergency responders who have been working tirelessly, local leadership or civil defence teams in the affected areas. It is simply that NEMA's advice is that we can better support those affected regions through a nationally coordinated approach. Since Sunday, NEMA have been in close contact with local civil defence teams of affected areas to assess the need of a declaration of a national state of emergency. NEMA have been giving advice to myself and the Prime Minister on the need of a national state of emergency based on the assessments of the local teams. And until now, the advice has been that it was not necessary. NEMA met with the local civil defence teams earlier this morning and advised that local civil defence teams also fed back that a national state of emergency would be beneficial. This declaration enables the government to support the affected regions, coordinate additional resources as they are needed across multiple regions, and help set the priorities across the country for the response. A national declaration is a significant legal instrument, and it has been important that it has been prepared correctly. This declaration gives us the ability to give further resources to affected regions. I want to emphasise that the government has already been surging support and resources to the regions for some days. Our message to everyone affected is safety first. Look after each other, your family and your neighbours. Please continue to follow local civil defence advice and please minimise travel in affected areas. If you are worried about your safety, particularly because of the threat of flooding or slips, then don't wait for emergency services to contact you. Leave and seek safety, either with family, friends, or at one of the many civil defence centres that have been opened. I want to thank everyone who has stepped in these really difficult circumstances. We are seeing iwi, community groups, and many others opening up shelters, providing food, comfort, and support to so many people. And again, I just want to acknowledge that the tireless work of the responders who have been working night and day to help keep those communities safe. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge that there have been reports of a missing firefighter, a volunteer firefighter, who is a professional and highly trained but left their family to work for their communities, and the search continues. Our thoughts are with the FENZ staff and their families. I'll now pass on to Acting Director of Civil Defence, Roger Ball, to talk through what the state of national emergency means going forward.
Thank you, Minister. Tēnā koutou katoa. What we know is, as the Minister has said, that we have declarations of states of local emergency in 6 regions: Northland, Auckland, Tairāwhiti, Bay of Plenty, Waikato and Hawke's Bay. And the Tararua district has also declared an emergency for its area. We also still have multiple weather warnings and watches in place, and unfortunately the effects of Cyclone Gabrielle will continue to be felt throughout New Zealand through today. NEMA and the National Coordination Centre operating beneath the Beehive has been in close contact this morning with Civil Defence Emergency Management groups and with emergency services. Based on that, my conclusion and the conclusion of us all was that a national state of emergency should be recommended to the Minister. The declaration covers the 6 areas or regions that I mentioned, and now with the declaration from Tararua District, they will also be added. If other areas or regions declare in the coming hours, we'll add them to the national declaration. Under a state of national emergency, myself as the Director and my National Controller have authority to direct and control the response under the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act, including allocation of resources and setting priorities. We'd like to emphasise that the government has already been surging significant support and resources to the regions for many days. This declaration won't change the ongoing role of Civil Defence Emergency Management groups and agencies to do their jobs locally. But what this declaration does give us is the ability to set overall intent and to respond to multi-regional needs, to allocate critical resources in a coordinated manner across the country. It will also, I hope, provide public assurance that national authorities have this and no effort will be spared. It's not our intent to start micromanaging the operational response on the ground. We continue to have confidence in the Civil Defence Emergency Management groups, in the emergency services and in the responding agencies to do the job in support of their communities. We are also hugely appreciative of the efforts of volunteers, NGO groups, iwi marae networks, and indeed the public for their support to date. What do we need you to do? If you're feeling unsafe, there are a number of civil defence centres that are open and you can go to those and find the information on your local civil defence channels. If you're relocating, let your friends and family know what you're up to. In impacted areas, if the advice is to stay at home or to minimise travel, please follow that advice. Drive to the conditions. Watch out for flooding and debris on the roads. Do not enter floodwaters. Do not play in floodwaters. This is still an unprecedented and dangerous weather event. Don't take chances. Please keep up to date with Met Service weather warnings and advice from your local Civil Defence Emergency Management group. It's important to stay informed even if your power is out. Radio New Zealand is the civil defence broadcaster and is available on AM and FM frequencies. Thank you.
Happy to take questions.
What was the event that tipped it over for you in terms of the recommendation for a national state of emergency?
I'm happy to take that one, Minister. So not a particular event, but I would say that this morning when we conducted our engagement and consultation with the Civil Defence Emergency Management groups and also with the agencies present here in the National Coordination Centre, and they include police, FENS, NZDF and many others, our assessment was that the cumulative effects of this event required a recommendation to the Minister for a state of national emergency.
Resources, for example, like the military, can you deploy them under the national state of emergency? Is that the sort of power that you need?
Yes, that's not quite right. We can still deploy those resources and have been proactively for many days now. Those resources are already out in every single region and quite significant numbers, especially in Auckland in recent days.
Are there any resources that you couldn't deploy that you can now, or is it more that coordination effort that is the important thing?
It is more the coordination effort and more the efficient allocation of resources according to priority needs.
Are you satisfied with the speed at which this national state of emergency has been declared? Would it have been useful if it was done last night or overnight, for example?
It's a pretty high bar. You'll know that it's only happened twice before now with Christchurch earthquakes and, of course, the COVID response. The criteria is in a large part assessing the local responses, the resources that they have, and also the resources that we have provided them over the last few days, and whether there is a benefit to coordinate that response at a national level as opposed to locally. The assessment was, and the advice that I received this morning, was that we are now at the point where that would be beneficial to all those affected regions if NEMA was able to assist with coordination at a national level. It's not a case of resources. The message has always been very clear to those affected regions. Tell us what you need and we'll get it to you. And that's the process we've been following. And that's the process we'll continue to follow under the national state of emergency.
Anyone pushing for that to happen last night?
No, they understand that the process is pretty straightforward, really, is that this isn't the sort of thing that we want politicians to be doing without sound advice. It is significant. It is a significant legal instrument. And so on Sunday, I asked NEMA to provide the Prime Minister and I with regular advice as to whether it was needed, so that we were in no doubt as to the state of play. And at regular intervals, we received advice that it was not needed. This morning, after meeting with local civil defence officers, the advice was that it would be likely required. Once we received the advice, I signed the paper.
So coordinating.